Hi everyone, this is Kyle with kayDbait. I wanted to make a video on a question somebody asked me yesterday. It was just a friend. English wasn't his first language, and he asked me what bias meant because I used it to say something to him, and he's like, "Well, what does bias mean?" And my answer was, it's somebody that has a preconceived idea about something, but that's not the only answer. There's other ways of being biased towards something. So I wanted to make a video today explaining my views on what biased means and how people can be biased. And generally, I'm going to go off of stuff that people already know. But the two different ways are having a preconceived idea about something or having an agenda within something. That's the other one. It's when you bribe somebody or you give them an incentive to do something, then they become biased. They become invested in a certain outcome. They want a certain outcome. So their actions are dictated or influenced by something else. And that's another form of being biased. So you can be a racist, sexist, bigot, but if you're invested in certain, like somebody giving you money or somebody having a certain outcome, you might put those aside and be biased in another direction as well. Everyone has a bias. And it took me a really long time, and I've said this before, to understand that I also have my own biases. I used to think that, hey, because I don't want people to suffer and because I don't want people to have problems and whatnot, and because I'm not racist, that I'm not biased. But I am biased. I have my own agendas, and I act accordingly. Everyone does. So my biases are, I think I've said these before, is I'm pro everyone. I want people to not suffer. I want people to not have problems. But at the same time, I know that, you can't just take from other people and give it to the people in need, because that's not, that's what people always associate with socialism and communism. And, the Democratic comics where it's like, oh, what was it? It was during the Halloween season. It was somebody going to somebody's house and taking the candy from the kids and giving it to the other kids. It's like spreading it around. It's like, oh, it's a Democrat. No, that's not what I'm talking about. People have been accusing Bernie Sanders of that as well, though it's more a distribution of the higher ups to the lowers, and it's complex. It's not that simple. It's not pure socialism. It's not pure communism or capitalism in any way. So there's complex issues about that. But another form of bias, there's a lot of different kinds of bias. Some of them are in the fallacies. If you look up the fallacies, you'll see a lot of different kinds of bias. Confirmation bias is just one of them. It's where you want a certain outcome to happen, or a certain outcome, you backwards engineer the logic to fit it. So-and-so did this, therefore it must be this. And then you become set on that because it's the first thing that came to mind, and it's to you the one that should happen because it confirms your own previous bias. So now you're just reaffirming your own stuff. It's not how logic works at all. It's how illogical stuff works. And by that I mean damaging things. So bias is not good. It's not something that is, it's not really an equalizing thing. It divides people. Bias is something that makes it harder to get along with people. That's not to say you shouldn't have your own ideas of right and wrong and morality and your own personal value systems. Everyone has a different value system. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, your behavior being dictated by a bias and not letting other things be valid. People that are all about themselves are more likely to dismiss other people's value systems. So people that are self-centered or apathetic. Empathy is like understanding other people's value systems and understanding where people are coming from and being able to feel other people's emotions, or at least understand other people's emotions. When I say feel other people's emotions, I mean like if somebody's sad and you empathize with them, you might become sad, that kind of thing. But understanding why they become sad and being able to realize and figure out why it's happening, that's another kind of level of empathy. It's being able to pick up social cues, which I'm actually fairly bad at, but I do strive to understand them, and I strive to when somebody is having trouble, to understand where that trouble is coming from, and like look things up, or figure out what kind of situation they're in, and be able to send them towards answers that they might benefit from. But the reason my friend was asking me about why, because I used the word bias to explain why I couldn't comment on something. He was asking me about a tulpa. I believe it's called a tulpa or a tulpa, which is it's a spiritual thing where you do you meditate for a really long time, and you're pretty much making there's a couple of different ways of explaining it, but the way I understand it is you make another person in your mind, and to me that sounds really bad. I have a lot of issues with people who have faked mental illness for their own benefit, or who have severe mental issues that do not work on them and instead make them worse and then hurt other people around them because of it. There was one person I knew that was very bipolar, and instead of taking their medicine, they would drink heavily, or when they were taking their medicine, they would drink heavily, which made them even worse. And they wouldn't go to the doctor. They wouldn't tell the doctors what were happening. And I would constantly tell them, is you have to take your medicine regularly, and you have to talk to your doctors about this stuff, and they just wouldn't do it. So I see people who have these ideas of escape, that they want to escape from their reality, and that's not what a tulpa is supposed to be. But when my friend asked me about the tulpa stuff and that he wanted to try it, and when I said I can't comment on that. I am biased towards people that mess with their own realities. And that's how I see what he was thinking of. He wanted to make an imaginary friend, which he wanted it to be for an experience. He wanted to see what it was like. He wanted to either use it for something like a creative outlet, or he wanted to use it for entertainment. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what reason he gave. It was in a large thing, but I couldn't comment on it because I was biased, and I said I cannot comment on this. And I'm not trying to say he shouldn't do it. When he further asked me, please give your 2 cents. Why are you biased? Why is this? I explained why I was biased, but I was not trying to push that bias on him. I was saying I cannot comment on that, and that's what a lot of people don't do. That's what a lot of people do the opposite of, is instead of saying they're biased, they will pretend there isn't one so that they can get other people to do what they want to fulfill their bias. I didn't want him to do the thing. I didn't want him to experiment with trying to split his mind. And that's my bias. I'm not saying other people shouldn't do this. I'm saying it makes me very uncomfortable. And that's my way of thinking. It's not something that I want to push on other people. If you think it's a good thing, or if you think that it's something you want to do, then I'm not going to yell at you for it, because it's not right for me to do that. So when he asked me again and again, please explain, then I did, and he decided not to do it because he was already kind of half in, half out. He wasn't really sure. And when he heard my reasoning, he's like, okay, you know what? It does sound kind of weird, and it doesn't really sound like the benefits outweigh the. He said he didn't think of it that way. It's like, okay, that's not what I was trying to do. He asked me, I explained after I had already said I didn't really feel comfortable, explaining it. But I did want him to understand when he inquired about it why I was biased. So it's not always easy for me to explain myself when I feel like I'm not being fair, because it's really hard sometimes to explain yourself without pushing your bias. It's, why don't you want to go over there? Well, I've had a history with that business or that area, and I don't want to go over there. But then you don't want to push that on them because they still want to have fun over there or whatever it is. It's like, why don't I go to McDonald's? I have a history with McDonald's. There's actually stuff there that makes me not want to go there anymore. But if somebody else wants to go to McDonald's, that's fine. You can do that. I'm not going to say you shouldn't go there. I'm just going to say I won't go there. So there's different levels of bias, and it can be based off of, real life things. It's like, hey, I don't like, jawbreakers because, some people in my family almost died choking on them. So I wouldn't give them to my kids if I had any kids. I don't consider them a nice candy anyway. They taste bad to me. There's different reasons why I would go against jawbreakers, candies that you can very easily die on. Or do I want a gun in my house or don't I want a gun in my house? Those are big ones. You could be biased against that. It's like, I don't want you in my house with a gun, or I don't want you to mess with my gun because I'm going to have it. There's different ways of having a bias. And a lot of them are justified. I mean, I'm not saying they're not, but to push them onto other people when it's not, important to do so. Like, you can say, you're infringing upon my rights as a person, or you're infringing upon this, and therefore my viewpoint is valid within the situation. But if it's not valid and you're just pushing it to push your agenda because you want to be loud and obnoxious and annoying, that's not what you think of in your head, but that's what you're doing. And that's the only reason you're doing it. People do things outside of their own personal, in their head justification. They're actually doing it for another reason. Self-glorification, being noticed, having people listen to them, loving the sound of your own voice, that kind of stuff. A lot of outspoken people, the loudest people in a lot of communities, are really just doing it for the attention, and I find that to be sickening in a lot of ways, because it's just you're standing on a soapbox for the sake of being, valued. And the reason I'm making these videos is not that reason. And I've commented on that before, is I'm making these videos because I want to be understood. It's not necessarily that I want to be popular or that I want people to agree with me. I don't mind being disagreed with. I do have an ego and I do need to work on that more, but that's not the sole purpose of what I'm doing. It's not why I'm doing this. I don't want people to... It feels good to be agreed with. I will never deny that. It feels good to have people support you. It feels good to feel like you're making a difference, that you feel like you're helping people. But if that's not backed up with benevolence, with generosity or kindness, or for understanding of a situation before you comment on it, it's like, oh, you did this? Well, you're a monster, and then 100 people agree with you, and they start calling that person a monster and destroying their life or whatever, and then you feel validated, you feel good. It's like, look at all these people that agree with me. That doesn't make you right. That doesn't mean you did a good thing. If that person was a monster, or if that person really did hurt kids and you put them behind bars or whatever, okay, that's good. If they didn't and you just destroyed their life because you didn't like them, then no, you didn't do good. So you have to understand the situation and be correct, at least as far as you can do. Like, if you do all the research and all the studies and all this stuff and you're still wrong, at least you gave your all. You weren't just doing it on a whim. And that's another problem I have with bias, is that it promotes this lack of thinking because you're already right in your head. I was going to do this. In your head, you're already right. So you don't have to think about it. That's what another problem with bias is. You self-justify. You justify other people's actions without considering the ramifications or the intricacies of the situation. So when you do that, you're perpetuating ignorance. You might be right, but it's not a system that is perpetually right. It's luck. When you study something, when you think about something, and when you analyze something deeply, you will be right much more often, and you will have a foundation of further progress, of being more correct, even to the point of being 100% correct eventually. It's a positive thing to continuously assess a situation, future situations to be assessed, and that's a self-building one. It has a foundation. It has an ability to grow. Not doing that and just assuming and presuming and being biased, those don't have a foundation. It's a pool. It's a pool of grossness, and you're just waddling in and then swimming around in it, and then sometimes you'll be right. But more often than not, it's not going to be for the right reasons, and it's not going to be something you can rely on. So that's really it. That's my views on being biased, and I explained the situation of why it was that way. But I hope this was entertaining. I hope you guys understood And I hope to see you in the next video, and peace.